a participant wishes to speak, can you please put your hand up if you can be seen on screen, or use the yellow raise hand function. Please ensure all debate is raised verbally and not via the chat function for the sake of the recording. The chat function may be used to highlight any technical issues and or to grab the attention of the chair or Democratic Services officer. If any participant has difficulty hearing or being heard when you're addressing the committee, then let the chair or Democratic officer know. If you have a webcam, then try turning this off, as this will help with broadband or Wi-Fi bandwidth, so you can at least hear and be heard. So thanks for coming, everyone. Great to see you as usual. We'll get straight into it with agenda item 1, apologies for absence. So I've received apologies from Councillor Elliot Penn and Lucy Barraclough, who I believe is hoping to join us, but may be delayed. Lucy.
Hi, yes, sorry, I was able to make it.
No worries, good to have you. Amy, I don't think there are any other apologies.
No, Chair, none to myself.
Thanks very much. If there's nothing else, we'll move on to agenda item 2, the minutes of the meeting held on 14th September 2023. If anyone has any suggestions, edits they'd like to make, let me know. Otherwise, I move we accept the minutes. If I could have a seconder for that. Thank you, Councillor Hennessy. Agenda item 3, declarations of interest and the nature of such interests under the Council's Code of Conduct. Martin Price.
Hi, it's about item 4, Mr. Cairns' presentation. I'm chair of the Vale Governors Association, and I think the invitation to him came as a result of the presentation we gave to the Scrutiny Committee in July. And additionally, I, on behalf of 8 of the local government, local authority governors associations throughout Wales, put a petition to the Senedd on the topic of school funding for schools. And I've been asked to present that in person to the Senedd Petitions Committee on the 13th of November. I think this is a personal declaration. I don't think it's prejudicial. If it becomes prejudicial later, then I'll withdraw from the meeting.
Thanks very much, Martin. Councillor Marshalsea.
Hi, I've been told to declare a personal prejudicial conflict of interest because I do work for Jane Hutt MS, and she was invited to the meeting. However, on doing some research, I found that actually she has not been invited to the meeting. So I'm unsure if she was invited or not.
Thanks, Naomi. She was invited. So thank you for that. Lucy, is that a legacy hand?
No, it's not a legacy hand. Similar to Martin, I'm a member of the Vale School Governors Association also, so I have a personal interest. If it becomes prejudicial, I'll have to leave also.
Okay. Many thanks, Lucy. Ghislaine.
Hi there. I'm a member of the same association, so as twice before, if it becomes prejudicial, I will leave.
Okay, thank you very much. Councillor Payne.
Thank you, Chair. I actually did check with Jane Hutt's office and no invitation was received, unfortunately. So who did the invitation come from?
So Lucy Whittaker, the Democratic Services Officer for this committee, sent invitations to
unfortunately no invitation was received, I'm afraid.
Okay, well, an invitation was sent. So if it hasn't been found in the inbox, that's a shame. Councillor Lynch-Wilson.
I am a member of the same committee as Martin. I don't think anything will be prejudicial, but if it is, I will leave.
Thank you for that, Councillor. If there are no other declarations of interest.
I'm a member of the same committee as Martin and Julie. If anything comes up, I'll leave as well.
Okay. Thank you very much. I think that's everyone. So in that case, we'll move on to agenda item 4, school funding and finance. We've invited both Jane Hutt and Alan Cairns, and tonight we have Alan Cairns in the chamber with us. And over to Alan, it'll be a statement first, and then councillors will have the chance to ask questions about the issue of school funding and financing, and then Alan will make a closing statement. So over to Alan Cairns.
Well, Thank you very much, Chair. It's a privilege to have the opportunity to address the committee. There is, I should say probably at the outset, and in the spirit of everyone else declaring an interest, although obviously I'm not a decision maker on the committee in any way, shape or form. My wife is an education lawyer who regularly challenges or supports children in challenging local authorities, and occasionally that can be the Vale of Glamorgan in terms of representing usually children with special educational needs or in admissions and exclusion appeals. But that's a matter for her, and I have no association, but I want everyone to be aware that that's a potential conflict. So this is probably the most important issue in my mind facing young people in the Vale of Glamorgan. The funding deficit that the Vale of Glamorgan receives from the Welsh Government has been significant for many years. The Welsh Government's report themselves, written by Luke Sibieta back in 2020, highlighted that it is on average £750 per pupil below the Welsh average. Now, if you consider a primary school of 210 pupils, that's a 30 pupil intake. That amounts to the equivalent of 5 staff across a primary school. If you take a 1200 pupil secondary school, that amounts to around 30 staff from that school. And therefore that highlights the pressures and stress that goes on within so many of the schools. I regularly communicate with head teachers and with governors and with parents who raise this. But I think what was quite alarming quite recently in terms of the Senedd debate where the chairs of school governors associations from 8 local authorities throughout Wales wrote, and this is something that I think that all councillors should be concerned about, is when they highlight in their reports that 18 of 51 schools in the Vale are unable to discharge their responsibility to provide education to Welsh Government standards for the amount of funds they've been allocated. Now, I'm not a lawyer, I haven't sought any legal advice, but I would have thought that teachers and governors are potentially at risk of a legal challenge from pupils and parents, or the local authority is at risk of a challenge from teachers and governors themselves. And that is something that I think we all should be concerned about, particularly if the schools are not able to fulfill their statutory obligations. I'd also underline the cumulative effect, because this debate has been running for many, many years. And it goes back probably to the early 2000s. And this is something I'm hoping we can come together on, because I was a member of the Welsh Assembly in 1999 when the Assembly was formed. And the key priority that was highlighted by 4 local authorities, and that was Blaenau Gwent, Merthyr Tydfil, Rhondda Cynon Taf, and Neath Port Talbot, where the local authority, the MPs, and the Assembly members all came together from those 4 authorities to challenge the Welsh Government over the unfairness of the formula. Now, the formula, as a result of that political pressure that was combined across all parties that I've mentioned, led to a change in the formula. And that is one of the occasions where the Vale will have missed out. So this has been a growing challenge. So therefore, as we look to the deficits that have been published for the projected deficits for some schools, one school is of a close to £1 million in a year or so's time, then this clearly cannot sustain itself. And there needs to be a fair formula. And I would recommend to the committee that you might want to consider Luke Sibieta. This was a school that was this was a report written for the Welsh Government. Luke Sibieta is a resident, as far as I understand, of the Vale of Glamorgan. He has, from the time I remember, he has pupils in schools in the Vale of Glamorgan, and he was commissioned by the Welsh Government to publish a report. Now, there are several themes within that report. One highlights the underfunding that the Vale receives, because the Vale is particularly highlighted because it's bottom of the league table at the time. And the second element that he highlights is the cumulative effect over that period And sorry, the third, there were 3 points that I wanted to highlight. The third is the lack of transparency of the funding formula that distributes money throughout Wales. And then the final point I'll make, and then take obviously any question that you deem appropriate. The final point I'll make is that the Welsh Government naturally receive funding from Whitehall. Now, when I was Secretary of State for Wales, and the current First Minister was the Finance Secretary, he and I, along with the Treasury, negotiated, where ironically it was Mark Drakeford and me on one side and the Treasury on the other, and we both came away from those negotiations recognising that it was a very fair deal that we'd gained out of the Treasury. So I remember Jerry Holtham, who was the Welsh Government's advisor at the time, went on record and said that it was a very fair deal. So it ultimately means that Wales receives £120 for every £100 that is spent in England. So that means that the Welsh Government, according to their advisors and the First Minister when he was Finance Minister at the time, said that that was a fair sum of money in terms of the distribution of money. But my challenge that I think we all should rally behind or support each other is in challenging the Welsh Government about the distribution of that £120 for every £100 that is spent in England. Because as it stands now, we're not supporting our pupils, we're not supporting the teachers and governors, and the ones I worry about most are those with special education needs or additional learning needs, as it's referred to here in Wales, because those are the ones, if you talk to teachers, where resources are being cut back from in order to try to meet the statutory obligations elsewhere. I hope that's a helpful introduction, and I'll happily take any questions or any points that people want to make.
Thank you very much for that. So over to councillors, committee members, if anyone's got a question, raise your hand. Councillor Hodges, straight in there, over to you.
Thank you, Chairman. Thank you, Alan. I'm grateful for you turning up to see us tonight. This came about a few months ago in committee, where we were being effectively and correctly, I believe, lobbied by our own Governors Association, and then telling us about their plans to try and help the funding situation of schools here in the Vale of Glamorgan. I moved that you and Jane would be invited to committee to help us basically in this quest to fund our schools more effectively and in a better way. You're absolutely right in many respects. This is a long-standing thing. I think we've been underfunded in the Vale of Glamorgan ever since the Vale of Glamorgan came into being as a county borough. When we disassociated from Cardiff and the old South Glamorgan, in many respects, the Vale had a very poor and bad deal on many aspects of funding. What I'm concerned about, and I've listened to what you had to say, and I understand many of your points, but the main issue for me is the here and now, because we have so many of our schools in deficit funding. And while they do have these recovery plans either in place or being put in place to recover, it basically means, of course, that they're robbing every year in those recovery years to refund that deficit, which will probably get worse with time and lead probably and essentially to staff cuts, which is the vast majority of money, of course, that is spent by our schools is on staffing. The main issue I tried to make in the debate where we gave the invites out was that the issue wasn't just with the with Welsh Government, with the Senedd and how it funds, although the formula has been constantly and consistently unfair to the Vale of Glamorgan, but the fact that the pie itself, as I tried to say, was not only needed to be cut up more fairly, but also it needed to be a bigger pie, which is why I specifically asked for you as well as Jane to attend. And that means that more funding should come from Westminster and be given over to the Vale to Welsh Government, and therefore be able to be split to us. This is basically a naked lobby by us and the Vale Glamorgan scrutiny committee here on that covers education, lifelong learning and culture, to say, please do all you can to actually increase the funding and any influence you can bring to bear on that funding. If Jane was here, I'd be making the same plea to her, but obviously in her aspect, which is Welsh Government funding. The formula constantly puts the Vale Glamorgan at a huge disadvantage. But with all the various cuts to budget there has been at Welsh Government, they themselves are under pressure. We, of course, at the local education authority end, which is the Vale, are under that pressure as well. I mean, there were cuts last year to our education budget, which has resulted in these schools being put largely into deficit. And I was just wondering if you could be more proactive in what you're trying to tell us and what you're prepared and perhaps able to do. That's what I've got to say, and I thank you for coming.
Well, thank you, Councillor Hodges, and thank you for prompting or initiating the invitation, because this is an ideal opportunity to debate the nitty-gritty behind the issues, not only the impact on teachers and pupils, but also on the mechanics that go behind that lead to that themselves. Now, I remember when we renegotiated the funding formula back in 2017, as I already said, that the First Minister, who was then Finance Minister, said that it was a very fair deal. I would also add, since that, or at the current level, here and now, as you rightly said, is that public spending in the UK is at record levels. That's naturally because of a whole host of issues, but and taxes as a result of that are at the highest level since the Second World War. So the point I'm highlighting is that public spending is at record levels, and the outcome of that public spending being at record levels is that Wales is receiving more money as a result, and that's the £120 for every £100 in England. But I think it's also worth recognising that England, with £100, not the £120, that their schools again are about £600 better off, or their per pupil in England, than we are in Wales in general. So the English average is about £600 per pupil higher than the Welsh average, and the Vale of Glamorgan is £750 or so below the Welsh average. So, I mean, it doesn't take a genius to work out the scale of difference between a similar pupil in Bristol compared to a pupil in Barry. And that highlights the scale of it. So, of course, when that funding formula was agreed of the £120 for every £100 in England, a funding floor was put in to ensure that it doesn't fall below £118 ever. And in addition to that, tax varying powers were also devolved to the Welsh Government. So if there is a will to make the cake even bigger than what it is now, which is the highest public spending levels relatively since the Second World War, the Welsh Government also have the opportunity, if they believe they are receiving insufficient funds, to raise taxes because they have the freedom to do so. Now, I don't know if that's their political priority, it's not mine, but that if they want to make the cake bigger, they can make it bigger by using their powers that I devolved to them when I was Secretary of State.
Thank you, Nick, for the question. Councillor Gilligan.
Hi, Alan. Long time no see. Just like to mention about obviously the cost of living and the huge rise in utility bills. That's not just in our own households, but it's going to have a major effect with, you know, another winter going into schools, etc. And I know in Wales, you know, we did free school meals, but, you know, children don't learn on empty stomachs. And I think it's essential that we can get funding for free breakfast clubs for pupils as well, because children go to school when they're hungry, they don't learn. And even though they've got a lunch, you know, for some pupils, it's the only meal that they have. This has an adverse effect on many aspects of a child learning, and also their mental health. So I think, you know, you stated that, you know, you renegotiated, or the Parliament renegotiated this in 2017. Well, that was 6 years ago. A lot has happened in that 6 years with COVID and many other aspects of life. So I think it's time you know, Westminster started negotiating a new contract to help pupils and schools in Wales. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Councillor Gilligan. Well, I'm not aware of the Welsh Government asking for the funding formula to be renegotiated, but clearly if they wanted to do that, I've got no doubt that that would be brought up to the Treasury. But you really raise an important point about free school meals and breakfast clubs and so on, because clearly that was a policy decision to provide free school meals for everyone in primary schools, and I don't know, I can't remember if it extended to everyone in secondary schools, but I think that has potentially exaggerated the challenges that teachers and governors have, because that money will be coming out of the sum of money that we conclude, or the reports identify as underfunding. So that £750 shortfall, so for example, the number in the Vale is 6,045 against 6,773 for the Welsh average. So the Vale school, the free school meals would have to come out of that lower level of funding, which then means the net money for teachers' pay, for extra support for teachers, for books and so on, would obviously have to come out of that. So unless the free school meals had additional money over and above, but I strongly agree that pupils can't learn on an empty stomach, but I would have hoped that families play their part. I would also then hope, secondly, that the schools would have been given the freedom to decide whether they use it on books or teachers, or whether they use it to provide free school meals maybe to families that don't necessarily need it, because it's hardly good value for money to provide a free school meal to the child of a millionaire, surely.
Thank you for the question, Wendy. Councillor Payne.
Hiya, good evening, Alan. Mine's a simple question, really, and it is about, do you think that Westminster should be providing more funding to Wales so that in order to increase the pot in terms of the funding formula for the whole of Wales, of which the Vale of Glamorgan is included, so that we can increase the funding across the board?
Well, I think if there is an argument for more funding for Wales, I would have thought that the Welsh Government would have argued for that in the first instance. The second point I would then make is that if there is an argument for further funding for Wales, and that would mean that the taxes would have to rise. So I think on balance, public spending is as the highest level since the Second World War on a relative basis. And therefore, that probably answers it, that out of all governments since that time, that we haven't had spending levels at this height. I'm not aware either of the opposition party either calling for either for higher taxes, nor am I aware of them calling for extra spending commitments either. My understanding is that both main parties in the House of Commons have committed to the same spending envelope. So that then means we've got to slice the cake in a different way. But I think we're on the same side here, because Wales gets £120 for every £100 spent in England. So all we need to do is ensure that the Vale of Glamorgan gets its fair share of that £120. At the moment, we're not getting the fair share. So if we can do exactly the same as those did in Merthyr Tydfil, Blaenau Gwent, Rhondda and Taff and Neathport Talbot back in 1999, when the Assembly came together, they were absolutely determined to work with their local authorities, across Assembly member and across Member of Parliament, to challenge the then First Minister. And thankfully, for those authorities, of course, Rhodri Morgan at the time recognised the underfunding and adjusted the formula. So I think that we have the same challenge, because there's been 25 years have passed since then, and this is our opportunity for a revision, surely 25 years down the road.
Thank you for that. My question was kind of, do you think, and would you be putting a case forward for more funding? But I know that capital funding for school funding in Wales has increased by 122% between the years 2014 to 2023. And also, don't forget, in terms of the 21st Century Schools programme, I think we have new schools, and how many new schools do we have in the Vale of Glamorgan? I'm not sure, Rhys, if you know. Chair?
I don't know the exact number, Helen. I'm sure someone will be able to
Yeah,
answer
so
at
I
some
think
point.
I counted at least 7 in the Vale of Glamorgan. So I just want to kind of to make that point that more funding would be good for the Vale of Glamorgan from Westminster. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Councillor Payne. You make a really important point, because some schools in England still have the legacy, although it is coming to an end, of the private finance initiative. You may remember that there were some years from 97 onwards, there was a massive growth of private finance initiative, which left schools with large debts. But thankfully, they're coming to an end now. But I would correct you on one point, Councillor Payne. You said you'd like more funding from the Vale of Glamorgan from Westminster. Sadly, that doesn't work that way, because it has to go for education through the Welsh Government. That's a legislative requirement, is that the Barnett formula, the enhanced Barnett formula, effectively transfers money from the Treasury automatically. It's a mathematical formula, so there's no political discussion in it. That effectively goes straight to the Welsh Government for distribution. But we're not getting that fair distribution, and that's something I'm surely we can all agree. I do remember that the trade unions, working with a previous leader of the Vale of Glamorgan Council, trying to bring assembly members and MPs together under the leadership of Dr. Vince Brown, in order to try to get an adjustment of the formula. A former leader tried to do that. Dr. Vince Brown worked exceptionally hard to try to coordinate it, but sadly we didn't get support in all quarters. But the trade unions were really keen to support.
Thank you, Helen. Martin Price.
The reason the Vale Governors Association brought this to the Learning and Culture Committee was because there are basically 2 issues here, which is what Councillor Hodges was referring to. One is that the Vale gets less of the pie than it should do. The second real main one is that the pie is too small. And I think the Vale is particularly disadvantaged when the pie becomes small. So, the petition which I put forward to the Senedd is from 8 different local authorities, all of which are better funded than the Vale. So you're talking Newport, Cardiff, Conway, Wrexham, Bridgend, Merthyr and RCT. And each of those is having the same sort of problems with schools which are unable to balance the books. That is, schools which are unable to provide the education they're supposed to for the money they're given. I mean, today's Western Mail has an article about Carmarthenshire, which has run out of its funds for its rural schools, particularly. The issue has been brought to a head because of the size of the pie going out is insufficient, and that is a consequence of not enough money coming in from Westminster, maybe, or it's a consequence of different priorities within Welsh Government. It's not for us to say what the problem. From the point of view of the Vale Governors Association, we aren't the people to tell you what the solution is. We're just pointing out the problem in a big way.
Well, thank you, Mr. Price. I would say that it's definitely the point that the cake isn't being shared in an appropriate way within Wales, because the spending per person in Wales is the highest level that it's ever been. So that highlights the distribution. But I appreciate that it's difficult for you as an individual or the Governors Association to make that statement. But I'm happy to absolutely say that spending levels should be sufficient in order for appropriate distribution. There's just one simple thing would help. Why on earth does the formula still use the census data from 1991? Now, there's no logic in that at all. And I remember challenging Kirsty Williams when she was the Welsh Education Minister, following the review of school spending report that the Welsh Government had commissioned in Wales. And she recognised that the Vale of Glamorgan was underfunded like other authorities, or she recognised the level of funding that the Vale of Glamorgan received and other authorities compared to others, or the disparity that was there. And her answer was quite simple, that she was happy to adjust the formula, providing all local authorities agreed. Now, the reality is, for some local authorities who are losing at the moment to become winners, then other local authorities that are winning at the moment have to become losers. Now, out of 22 local authorities, I cannot ever believe that one authority would vote in order to receive less funding. And that's why the Welsh Government need to change the formula and take a leadership on this, rather than expecting local authorities to resolve it themselves. I've got every sympathy for local authorities, including the Vale of Glamorgan. And Mr. Price, I'd say, you highlighted in response to the authorities and the governors of 8 local authorities that came together. It may well be that those 8 local authorities, together with their with their members of the Senedd and their members of Parliament and the governors from those authorities, should be the similar campaign group that was formed to the one I mentioned that came together in 1999. I remember that the then local authority leader here in the Vale did reach out to Newport Council, for example, for which there was some common ground, because Newport Authority was one of the ones that was equally poorly funded, and that would at least would have made a cross-party engagement in challenging the Welsh Government to readjust the formula. But it cannot be right that some schools or some pupils in Wales receives a much higher level of funding than others, and governors and head teachers are struggling to meet their statutory obligations. Because I would have thought, as a layperson, I'm not a lawyer, but as a layperson, to be exposed to a legal challenge from parents or from teachers or from governors is something extremely serious, and then obviously the authority would have to defend its position.
Thank you. It's one observation is that you were talking about the education funding formula being based on the 1991 and the 2001 census. It's actually the whole basis of which local government funding is spent, so that social services, roads and everything else are also based on those. So the Vale loses out on the fact that Wales has changed over the last 30 years.
I think you're absolutely right, Mr. Price. I don't see any logic. Why on earth are we using data that's 30 years old? I mean, it just simply doesn't make sense.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Martin. Councillor Lynch-Wilson.
Hi, just a couple of points and a little question. Firstly, regarding the comprehensive schools, I believe all of our comprehensive schools bar one have been anew, and that one is in the pipeline. Plus, regarding free school meals, the fact children don't learn when they're hungry. Plus, in this cost of living crisis we're going through at the moment, I know lots of parents who are just above the old funding for free school meals, and it's a godsend to them, you know, that they're getting the free school meals for their primary school children. My question is, do you think that, you know, it's our schools, I believe, are getting really good value for the money they get? I've had 5 children in Lantwit School. My last one's doing A-levels. The school is it's all new and beautiful, and it's a lovely learning environment. And you know, there's a lot of positives. I think we're sort of looking at negatives. I mean, do you feel there are any positives that you can give us?
Thank you, Councillor Lynch-Wilson. First of all, 2 points that you've raised. The first one is in relation to free school meals. That's a policy choice, and that's a reasonable, important policy choice. But I don't think that should then that education should be compromised on the back of that policy choice, because the education standards or the education resource should be protected in order to achieve the statutory obligations which the governors are concerned that they're not meeting. And then, Councillor Lynch-Wilson, you rightly highlighted the new school buildings throughout the Vale of Glamorgan, and I commend the authority for that. That is something that was long overdue in so many places, and over recent years, it's so good to see new buildings throughout, and they will play a big part in reducing energy costs and some of the challenges that older buildings previously would have had. So I think the teachers and the governors and the head teachers achieve so much with what they've got, but I only wish that they had the same level of resource that they had as the average in Wales would be a start. But even if Wales had the same level of resources that was made available to schools in England, then that would be even better. But look, I'll settle for the average in Wales as a first step.
Thank you, Julie. Councillor Goodjohn.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you for coming along, Mr. Cairns. Do you have any plans then to help us alleviate the pressures, the budget pressures in our schools?
Well, thank you, Councillor Goodjohn. I think that's a great question. Yes, I mean, I've been campaigning and working on this for many, many years, as others have. And I think that this is the time where we put party politics completely aside. We come together with those other authorities who want to work with us, and that we challenge the Welsh Government. Let's have a meeting like this with the Welsh Government Minister. Let's find out why we're still using data that's 30 years old. Let's find out why there's no transparency, as their own report highlights. Let's find out why it's such a complex formula. And the recommendations were accepted that it should be so much simpler. I think we're supporting what the Welsh Government's own report said, and we just need some will in order to go about to change it. So I am absolutely behind you or behind anyone else who's making the same calls, or I'll happily lead anyone who wants me to make those calls. So I'm here to work with anyone that can improve the outcomes for the pupils throughout the Vale of Glamorgan and elsewhere in Wales, where they are also underfunded to a similar degree.
Thank you, Emma. Councillor Burnett.
Actually, Chair, as I'm not a member of the committee, I'll wait until Councillor Hodges has spoken. Thank you.
Councillor Hodges.
Thank you, Chair. Having my second go, it's been an interesting debate, and I'm grateful for Alan answering the questions as best as he could. This is not an attempt by me to talk about England. I'm concerned about the level of funding that comes to Wales, and I am equally concerned about how the pie, as we keep referring to it, is distributed in Wales, and that's Welsh Government. Councils in England are going bust all over the place, so not everything is rosy there either. Now, many of that is down to council incompetence. I get that, and speculation and going on the, playing with economics and God knows what. But my concern is the here and now. I wanted a two-pronged approach to trying to alleviate this. One from hopefully Jane Hutt as a local member, saying what could and should be done, and us telling her that the formula is wrong, the formula is unfair, and more money needs to be found, or other options need to be brought forward. And the other approach was to you, of course, as Westminster, to say that pie needs to be bigger. That's the only point I was trying to make by getting committee to call this, and the two of you here at a meeting. I still haven't heard a commitment from you to lobby for a larger bit of the pie. I hear that taxes are at the highest rates. I hear that Labour committing to the same funding envelope. I know that. I could be political and say, well, you both would say that, wouldn't you? But all I'm asking for is an understanding of what you potentially, as our MP, can do for us. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Councillor Hodges. I will work with you and with anyone to try and get at least more modern census data to be used in the funding formula distributed that incorporates the local authority funding. I mean, that's something that should be a given and something should be easy and straightforward. Now, I appreciate, look, the Welsh Government ministers have got a challenge, and there may well need to be some sort of transitional funding for those authorities that lose out at the end. But our job is to ensure that we're fighting for the pupils in the Vale of Glamorgan that are not receiving the resource that they should be receiving. And I think that the funding formula needs to be adjusted, exactly as the Welsh Government's own report highlighted, needed to be adjusted. It was written back in 2020, and it's simply gathering dust as it stands. We just want them to implement what their report said that they should do.
Thank you, Nick. Over to Councillor Burnett.
Thank you, Chair. With committee's permission, I just wanted to take this back a little bit, to look a bit more holistically. I think, as we would recognise, the whole area of funding formulae is a hugely complex area with a whole range of anomalies. Funny enough, I've just had a whole day of budget rounds, and one of the things that I spotted, I didn't manage to get any more recent figures, I know they're in there, is that between 2011 and 2016, we were down £45 million in terms of our budget. I mean, it doesn't get any better. But what I will say is that, as we would know, that there are within the formulae, there are standard spending assessments. And IBA in terms of education, and this council has funded above SSA or IBA every year since 2012. So we have funded above IBA. Now, are there things that should be done with that budget? I mean, I know Mr. Ken's memory probably goes back a lot further than mine, because, having been an assembly member from originally, that there are always unintended complications, or consequences, and we know that it is a complex area. So, but I think that one of the things that we can say is last year, Welsh Government passed more percentage-wise to local government than they actually received from the UK Government. This council was the third highest funded in percentage terms, mostly down to demographics. And in terms of this council, last year, and just to correct, I can't remember who said it, the Vale allocated an increase of 15.7%, whereas we received 8.9% in our budget increase. An increase of 15.7% in the school's budgeted expenditure compared to the previous year, and that's the largest percentage increase out of all the local authorities, and also has increased the spend per pupil by 15.1% in comparison with the previous year. Now, I know the leader of Newport very well, it was just quoted, and from that perspective, they also have quite low funding levels, but actually they put their council tax up, I think it was 7%, in order to be able to increase their education spending. That's a consideration that we have to make. We know that, I think it's this year, it's nearly £1 million that 1% in council tax brings in. That is a question for us. We actually have a council tax below the Welsh average. So there are those things. But I think that when we talk about whether or not local government is got the highest funding, etc., we have to think back. Not only have we had COVID, but we had last year's fiscal event, and we are still coping with that. We're still coping with huge levels of inflation. And we've put out an initial statement in terms of our budget, and we are tens of millions adrift, and most of that is down to inflation and other cost pressures. In terms of funding between England and Wales, actually, Luke Sibieta in his report actually said, and in the ones that he quotes, is between 2010 and 2017-18, total school spending per pupil in England fell by about 8% in real terms, which compared with about 5% in Wales. And so actually, there's little or no difference in funding per pupil between Wales and England. We have to look at, if we unpick the Welsh model, and I know that Mr. Martin Price is hugely skilled on this because we've had many conversations. Some of the issues around that are to do with sparsity and deprivation, and we have to unpick that because we're not the highest council in terms of deprivation, we're not the highest council in terms of sparsity, and we have to unpick that. But we are very pleased that one of our highly skilled officers has been seconded into Welsh Government and actually was involved in the more recent revamp of our own funding formula, and hopefully will be looking at that in Welsh Government. But I think when we look at this topic of how much more Wales gets per head than England, actually it's based on need. The funding formula from a UK level is based on need. We actually don't get as much as Scotland per head, so we'll work on that. It's not an altruistic act. This is a funding formula that was negotiated. It turned out to be a fair funding formula, but I think we need to be quite plain on that. We continue to lobby Welsh Government. We continue to go through that. I have numerous papers that we've sent in. I have numerous conversations, and there are very few Welsh Government ministers that would come to the Vale without having been fully briefed on school funding before they arrive. But I do think that we are oversimplifying how funding formulas fit together and having to make sure that that we do not create unintended consequences by making changes that aren't fully worked out. A funding floor would be helpful, but as I said, I think that we're doing that. Welsh Local Government Association have actually offered to provide another training session. I think they came last year, another training session on funding formulae, and I think that it might be helpful if committee actually had another run through of that training to help them to understand this year's budget. We don't hear, I think it's mid-November before we're going to get any intimation of the UK budget, so we won't know what Welsh Government are getting. We are not going to know what we're getting until a few days before Christmas. So that in itself is going to pose some problems. But all I know is that we will continue to lobby, and we will continue, as we have done, and unfortunately to the detriment of other services, we will continue to support our children, and we will also continue to support our most vulnerable in terms of social care. So thank you, Chair, for the opportunity to speak.
Well, I'd like to thank Councillor Burnett. I think we're on the same page on so many of these issues. You rightly highlighted Luke Sibieta's report. The data I used between England and Wales was based on trade union data. So I would take it that Luke Sibieta will have come to his calculations. I don't know quite how the trade unions came to their calculations, but that's where I got the differences between Wales and England. And I absolutely agree. Changing the funding formula isn't straightforward. And I remember when Dr. Vince Brown tried to bring Assembly members and members of Parliament together some years ago, there were three issues that we thought in terms of the pecking order of simplicity. One was a funding floor, as Councillor Burnett rightly highlighted. That would be really helpful. The second issue was at least up-to-date data. Let's use modern the latest census data rather than census data that's 30 years old. And then the third challenge, which was obviously is the biggest challenge, is to revise the formula itself to ensure that the Vale gets a fair share. Because as the leader of an authority, as Councillor Burnett is, it's a difficult task if your authority is underfunded because you have to borrow Peter in order to pay Paul. And I think we do need to recognise, as Councillor Burnett just said, that, for example, that the allocation from the Welsh Government was an increase of 8%, but schools received an increase above that. Well, the reality is whatever is above 8%, that goes to schools has to come from another budget. And we all recognise the challenges on social services. We all recognise the challenges the authority will have on housing. And these are big challenges because the authority is trying to make up, in my mind, for the underfunding of the formula in the first place. So I do absolutely recognise the efforts that the authority are going to. And with the Chair's permission, I would like to say to Councillor Burnett and to every member on the committee, this is the time where we can come together. Let's repeat exactly what the late Peter Law did from Blaenau Gwent when he was the Assembly member there, what Peter Hain did when he was the Member of Parliament in Neath, and the RCT members and Merthyr Tydfil members when they all came together to cause that greater political pressure in a constructive way with the Welsh Government to get the adjustment of the formula. They succeeded in that. Now, that was 30 years ago. It's now time for us to succeed to try to redress the balance in order to serve the Vale of Glamorgan as authority overall, but for the priority of this committee, in order to properly serve the pupils and the teachers and the governors. I think we're on the same page, and it's about ensuring we get a fair share of the money that the Welsh Government receive in Cardiff Bay and Cathays Park.
Councillor Burnett.
It was just a point of clarification, Chair, that Welsh Local Government actually received 1% more than they received in their settlement from UK Government. So they made a choice to fund local government to a higher level. We actually got more than that because of demographics and need, and then we made a choice to prioritise education. So it was that is how funding works, is you work to your priorities. In terms of the potential for working together, well, we can discuss that tomorrow when we meet Mr. Cairns.
I'm looking forward to it very much.
Thank you for that, Councillor Burnett. Any other committee members like to ask a question? Okay, I can't speak now. Forever hold your peace. I can't see any hands up, so as outlined at the beginning, Alan will be able to make a closing statement before we move on. Over to you, Alan.
Well, thank you, Chair. Can I thank every member of the committee? And I think we all recognise the challenges, but I think we all have the greatest obligation to our youngest residents in the Vale of Glamorgan and giving them the best opportunity in life. These pupils will have missed out so much school, other than the youngest of all, because of COVID, and there's a need in order to provide the greatest level of support. And we also have a whole host of volunteers who are governors that work hard to try to support teachers and head teachers in balancing the books. This is an appeal to ask the committee, can we all work together with the leadership of the authority, remembering that Cardiff South and Penarth, that there are more members of the Senedd and MPs that represent the Vale of Glamorgan, and I would like to think on a combined effort we can really force the debate, or even encourage the debate, if you want to use a less inflammatory phrases, in order to get a deal that works better. A funding floor, up-to-date data. It's hardly sensible to use 30-year-old data, and a revision of the formula exactly as Luke Sibieta reports. And to finish on a positive note, Councillor Burnett rightly said that the funding formula is much more complicated than some suggestions that it might have been made throughout this evening. But one of the greatest calls from Luke Sibieta in his report was it needs transparency, and it needs to be more transparent, and it needs to be simpler. And even if we made that call, at least people can make a fair judgment as to whether the Vale of Glamorgan is getting the right money. But we know by the data provided by the trade unions and by various independent reports and by Mr. Price and the other governors that pupils in the Vale of Glamorgan are more than £700 a year worse off. And the final thing I'll say is that Councillor Burnett said 1% on council tax is roughly £1 million. Well, £750 per pupil on a 1200 school is roughly £1 million as well. So that goes to show the scale of underfunding that the schools get. And if we don't receive it in a balanced and fair formula, then council tax increases will be a consequence. But 1% will only make the deficit up in one school, and we have more than one secondary school in the Vale of Glamorgan.
Thank you, Alan. Thank you to everyone for taking part. So thank you for accepting the committee's invitation to come and speak about this important issue. I would like to say, for clarity purposes, as Nick outlined earlier, we have also invited Jane Hutt, the local Senedd member, and I am disappointed that we haven't even had the basic courtesy of a reply on that, which is a real shame. However, I would say the door is still open for Jane to address the committee, and that's an open door at any time would be great, and to join us in fighting for a better deal for the Vale. So
Chair,
thank you.
Could I have a point of clarification? I have actually made inquiries this evening. No invitation was received by Jane Hutt, and I would therefore ask that could be fully investigated. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Burnett. Councillor Birch.
I was going to make the same point. Councillor Helen Payne already made the point that she inquired and no invitation was received. So I think your remark was unnecessary.
Thank you. The invites weren't sent by me, they were sent by the Democratic Services Officer. So the invites were sent out, and Alan Cairns has responded. We've had this session tonight, so hopefully in future we can have the member of the Senedd for the Vale of Glamorgan. Thank you, Alan Cairns. I'd finish by moving that we note the presentation and thank Alan Cairns for joining us. If I could have a seconder for that. Yeah, Councillor Hennessy in the chamber, thank you very much. Moving on to agenda item 5, primary and secondary school attendance update.
Hello there. Chair, am I okay to show a presentation just to talk through the main points of the report?
Absolutely, thanks, Suzanne.
That's lovely. Thank you ever so much. Hello, everyone. I'll just share my screen, hopefully. Can I just confirm that you can see that, Chair, just so that everyone's...
That's fine, Susan.
Thank you. Thanks, Maureen. Okay, so I just thought I'd run through some of the key points that I put in the report. First of all, just to explain our team, the inclusion team in the Vale of Glamorgan, obviously a large part of our work is attendance, which is what we're talking about this evening. But we also cover children missing in education, which is linked to attendance, elective home education, exclusions, out of school tuition and support, and child employment and entertainment licence, just to give the context of the work that the team are involved in. Obviously in our work we connect with other teams within the local authority and beyond in order to provide a holistic level of support for young people, families and schools. So the team is made up of myself, 2 lead inclusion officers, 4 inclusion officers, and then 3 engagement officers, which has been a slight change and in response really to some of the issues that you'll be able to see with the trends in attendance. And that is that these engagement officers from September onwards now, 2 of them have a particular focus on the issues that are linked to persistent absenteeism and the increase in persistent absenteeism of some young people in school, which is currently under 80% attendance, as I know many of you will know. Excuse me. And then we have a data officer, admin support, and then our tutors. In terms of how we support schools, learners and families with all of that work, but in particular with what we're talking about this evening with attendance, is we have a universal offer of support that is largely, training, support, guidance, things like the attendance campaign that will affect all schools. A referral-based system where schools can refer directly into us for us to get involved with learners and families directly who are struggling to re-engage with school, and for us to support the school with helping to re-engage those young people. And then targeted support, which is when we're reaching out to schools when we can see particular issues around attendance. So we offer enhanced support, for example, maybe for schools and currently in special measures. This was on the report. This was the trends from before COVID and since COVID. And as you can see, for primary and secondary attendance, both sectors were very close to 95%. When you look at 2017 and 2018, and from 2016 onwards in primaries and secondaries as well. But then what you can see is since the pandemic is that significant drop. At the end of the year last year, primaries fell from that 95% level, which was pretty consistent in the Vale since before COVID, to 91.5 thereabouts. And as you can see, the concerning figure as well was the almost a 10% drop for secondaries. As we, when you're comparing us with other local authorities in Wales and the average, as you can see that from last year, we were ranked joint 6 in Wales, with our overall school attendance ending the year at 89%. The Welsh average for last year was 88.5%, but it was very close in terms of a 1% gap between the local authority that was at the first position in regards to attendance and hitting the level of 90% and ourselves. The other thing that really concerns us is not only the overall decline in attendance, but like I said, with the persistent absenteeism and the number of young people that maybe haven't re-engaged, especially since COVID, and all of the other concerning issues around mental health, social and emotional issues, anxiety, maybe since COVID, which we've seen that increase in. I just wanted to share with you the year to date, just to give you a sense of where we are for this, and it's only been a month in the academic year, but as you can see, the Welsh average has increased in the last month. We can see that increase on the end of year figure to nearly 92%, but you can also see our increase up to just under 92.5%. And again, it's very close in terms of those figures at the top end of the table there, between ourselves and the other local authorities. So I suppose that just gives a context that there seems to be that uplift in September, and obviously now the work is to maintain that and continue to improve it in order to maximise the chances for young people with being in school. So that's obviously the goal for the team going forward now, to help improve that further. Also to give you a little bit of a insight into where we are from September this year as well. You can see, like I said, the primary schools finished last year at 91.6. So there's also been a continued increase in the trend for this last month. So I know it's very early in the academic year, but they're currently 93.4%. And also with secondaries, we're seeing an encouraging increase as well. Like I said, they finished last year at 84.5 or so, and currently we're at 89. So some of the, I suppose some of the work that we've been doing with schools, especially towards the end of last year, to clarify processes, and with the campaign that I mentioned, may be part of the reason for this, but also that real hard work and focus in schools to really hit the ground running this year, to hopefully see that continued improvement. In terms of attendance, and how we're looking at attendance, obviously our ambition is to be 95% and above, really maximising that figure, so that young people across the Vale are maximising their chances of everything a school has to offer by being in school. Like I said, we're really aware of that figure that is concerning with the persistent absentee rate. So we've got a real goal and ambition to decrease that rate significantly this year, but we're also quite realistic in that it is a challenge. I think it's a challenge in every school at the moment, to improve and maintain attendance. So encouraging that creativity, because we're operating in a different time post-COVID. So I think the way that we go about trying to improve attendance has to be something that we all actively encourage creativity, both in the school but also in the local authority, and how we do our work and support schools and learners and families. Some things we've attempted just to start with, especially since COVID, was just to create clarity of processes and systems with the schools, because I think there was a lot of change, a lot of obviously during COVID, a lot of the regular attendance guidance was put on hold. Obviously it has come back into play now, but I think there was a little bit of greying of that clarity. So we've really focused on working with the schools to, especially now to start this new year, with real clarity of process and systems around attendance, and also talking to schools to really get a gauge of what they need from us as a local authority in terms of practical approaches to support the schools, parents and the young people. Another part of our work really is to try and identify and further identify barriers, and I think the way that we can do that is by gaining school voice, but also gaining parent learner voice, getting out into the community to see what the barriers are and the thoughts and feelings are around attendance, and really promoting that cluster work amongst schools and the community work. So a lot of the things that we have on our team plan and how we're working with schools is around those areas really, and that's led to some practical things which I've already mentioned in passing. The Miss School Miss Out campaign that I imagine a lot of you have seen around the Vale is an attempt really just to put attendance on the agenda, to really create those clear messages, to get people talking really about attendance. And I think the Miss School Miss Out logo is, if you like, or a kind of phrase or language around the campaign, is really trying to connect with everything that schools have to offer in a very holistic way. And obviously the teaching and learning is the core business of the school, but it's everything else the school offers young people and families, and the fact that school is a protective factor in many ways. So trying to promote that message within the campaign and through communications from schools. We've also launched an attendance toolkit that we'll be adding to, and that was to try and give everything we could to schools and continue to develop that with schools, so that from a practical point of view, especially with schools being such busy places with a lot of competing priorities, everything they need to really push forward on attendance. We're sitting down with schools as a team and having regular meetings where we're really looking at the data, asking questions, being curious and delving into what is going on for learners and families beyond the data, to see where we can target support, and through our clinics and also through our partnership audits, just to reflect on what schools are doing, how they're using their systems. And that's very much linked into like I said, the school voice really, and just sitting down and reflecting with schools about how they're approaching some of the key issues within, if you like, the attendance agenda. We're also going out to other local authorities in Wales to see any strategies they've put into place and what's worked and maybe what hasn't, and also going beyond Wales into other local authorities in England, but also internationally actually. And we were looking at work that's been done over in America, where these same issues exist, it seems, in whichever country you look at the moment, and a change in relationship with school and increased challenges with schools and attendance. We're also forming a school attendance officer and lead attendance, the attendance lead forum, and that's really to create a network of support to enhance knowledge and confidence for those colleagues that are at the front line. We're trying to promote attendance and keep it on the agenda within the sort of localities of the schools, and that links into a half-termly update communication that we'll be sending out to school leaders to kind of give those continual reminders of procedures, good practice, signposting to ourselves but other agencies that can help, and also reminding of training and support that we're offering, and like I said about the creativity, really supporting schools to explore different ways of connecting with families and learners that at the moment are struggling with engaging and attending, and supporting those pilot projects to see what could make the difference. And obviously, if these pilot projects work, we can roll certain projects out across the Vale, and then really practical responses with offering workshops and engagement work in order to collect parental voice, to see really from parents and learners' perspectives what are the barriers and how we can support them to improve their attendance and their engagement, and if it is a confidence issue, to return to school. So I think that's just an overview. I know there may be questions, so sorry, I'll just stop sharing my screen. There we go. I think that should be okay.
Thank you for the presentation, Suzanne. There are questions, 3 off the bat, so we'll go to Councillor Norman first.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you very much for that presentation. It was very interesting. I was wondering if the fact that the schools now, the junior schools now, are going to be offering free school lunches, do you think this will do anything to improve attendance for the junior school pupils, especially from children or families that are feeling the pinch, so to speak, providing food for the children? If they have the chance for free school meals, whether this will encourage more junior school children to attend?
Yeah, I'd imagine so. I mean, I think that thank you for that. It connects to what I said about maybe school being the protective factor in many ways, and also what school has to offer from a holistic point of view. So I imagine for a lot of families that certainly will be a positive. And I know from going out to primary schools, the breakfast clubs as well, and everything else that primary schools do, especially primaries, I know secondaries do as well, but to really engage with families and support them and look after the child in that holistic way. So yes, I imagine so for many families.
But do you think by encouraging the junior school attendance, this will carry on, and that's in their mindset for when they go into the comprehensive schools, the secondary education, that this habit then of attending regularly will carry on? So by getting them into schools in the junior schools, is a good start for this continued attendance.
Yeah, absolutely. I think and from chatting to the head teachers at primary school, they're very keen for us to support in any way we can from year 1 onwards, because it is about good habits for families and the young people to get that really positive experience of school, which obviously then, like you said, would help certainly to continue that engagement going up to secondary school as well.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you, Jane. Councillor Goodjohn.
Thank you. Thanks for the presentation. it's very interesting reading the report as well. I was wondering if we had any feedback on the barriers to do with attendance. Whether we had any data on that. Another thing as well, I was wondering if in the future whether the committee could see any more of the measures that you're taking to help with attendance, particularly with mental health support for children. If we could have more information and detail on that, I would be really, really interested in to see what's happening. Sorry, I'm throwing them at you here. I was just wondering as well about home education. I was wondering if you had any figures on that and any rise. If we could know about what's happening on the home education front, I'd be really interested. Thanks.
Okay, so I kind of do it in reverse, I think, and I may have to ask you about the first question was about barriers, wasn't it? Yeah. So yeah, I mean, this is what I think it kind of links to what I said in terms of us having to collect more in a more organised way, I suppose, parent voice about the barriers. I think we're collecting an awful lot of information. I know, from my team going out and chatting to schools and parents with the direct work they do. I think the barriers to the non-attendance are many. Sometimes it's the relationship connection with schools, but it can range to transport, it can range to and being able to afford to get to school. There are just many barriers, like you said, in terms of mental health, anxiety, and especially the legacy from COVID, sometimes linking to additional learning needs and the waiting time in via health for a diagnosis, and that can sometimes be a problem. There are many, but I think what we wanted to do this year is have a much more organized way of capturing that, and I suppose there's ways of capturing that from a quantitative point of view, but I think the strength will come from a lot of qualitative, the narrative of young people's experiences and families' experiences. In terms of, I think you said about the support and the interventions. I think we certainly can collect that, and obviously that will be linked to not just our team, but we could reach out to all the other teams, because it is a kind of multidisciplinary approach to supporting schools in that way. But I think to pull all that together, and I can see that would be of interest, so that's something we can certainly do. In terms of EHE, it has gone up, but I'm actually putting forward another report for yourselves to look at, ready for the next scrutiny, I believe, in November. So I'll be coming back with the figures for that, but it certainly has increased, and I think, well, I don't know, if I say too much, I'll be ruining it for next time for the report, but but it has increased. Yeah, it has increased.
Thank you. I would be interested, particularly in any counselling and any help that that students do get for mental health as well, and what that is. Maybe we could have a presentation or something in the future of that, because that I find very interested. And I was also just wondering whether remote learning actually comes into an equation to help students if they are finding it difficult, whether they can actually have some remote learning to keep them up with their education, whether that was happening or whether it may be a possibility in the future.
Yeah, I don't know, Martin, did you want to have a chat about the AV robots as an example of that for some learners?
Yeah, so just briefly on that, Councillor Goodjohn, there is a team, because I've worked closely with Susan in terms of raising attendance agenda, but there's also a team within my remit who, if referrals come through a panel process, there is potential access to distance learning packages. However, it's not without contention, because ideally we want our young people to be present in schools. So we do look at it kind of case by case to try and support our young people as best we can to re-engage. So there are very bespoke arrangements we can implement to try and enable that.
Just to add to that, sorry, Councillor Goodjohn, we through that panel as well, we have out of school tuition, which largely works with young people whereas school have tried maybe many layers of things, but there is that concern due to social, emotional, mental health, anxiety issues. The school will refer to the panel that Martin was just referring to then, and then using the OOS tuition service that comes under my team to act as a tool really to help re-engage the young person and build up their confidence by acting as almost a bridge back into school, which so the tutors are based in a quiet, smaller venue, but then we've got a member of our team, which was part of the restructuring of our team, that will work as a bridge between the family, the child, the school, and the youth tutors. And that seems to have already, actually, because I had a meeting with them today just to see how the learners were doing for the start of the year, and you can see that connection is already making a difference for some learners as well. But I suppose that's, I agree, we've got to look at very creative means, haven't we, to re-engage young people.
Yeah, I think that's
especially
very
those issues.
I think that's very interesting because I believe institutions that one size doesn't fit all, and I know we do our best in the Vale here to try to make learners comfortable. But it is, we're talking about young people and human rights. We use human rights for older people in the society, and it's very interesting. But thank you. It's good to know that you've got these resources and we're working on them. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Emma. Councillor Lynch-Wilson.
Hi, a very interesting report. It is quite embarrassing when you're governor of a school, your daughter is missing at least a day a week after COVID. Luckily, it's all fine now. Due to a lot of work by the school, can't thank them enough, because there was nothing you could do to convince her that she needed to go to school 5 days a week. And it's very difficult when you've got a child who had excellent attendance that just went off a cliff. And I know she wasn't the only one by any means. I know in her school that the attendance is on the up, which is really good news, and the work that is going on is absolutely fantastic. This is all. Already the budgets are really tight, as we know, but there's extra staff working, there's staff working, extra staff going way above and beyond. So I think COVID is the gift that is still giving, unfortunately. But there is light. I really think there is light at the end of the tunnel, and I can only thank everybody who's worked on this, because seeing it firsthand. My son has just started uni. He had sort of a gap year, but not, because 1 year was completely, wasted. He just couldn't get on with remote learning. And his GCSEs, his A levels, and the start of uni were all disrupted by COVID. And this is all our children. They've all got similar tales, and it seems to have affected children who you would consider to be very able, and children who are not so able. So unlike other things like the cost of living or that we normally like children who have free school meals and things like that, we take it for granted that we might have a problem. This has affected children who would normally be good attendees. So I just commend everybody on the work that you're doing.
Thank you, Julie. Councillor Payne.
Thank you, Chair. You won't be able to see me for some reason. My camera has stopped working, which has never happened to me before, but it might be good for you. So thank you, Suzanne, for a really comprehensive and considered report. So I used to do a thing, and I used to manage this youth work in schools programme, which is around about 23 years ago. And one of the things one of the stats that came out of that was that with support, young people would then attend school, and it improved its school attendance by 11%. So one of the things I had raised with you previously as well was coming with Ysgol Derw Newydd coming on. Would that have an impact on attendance, because you'd be picking up those pupils who would possibly be non-attenders or have had difficulties engaging with school environment. So we're looking at improving school attendance that way. Do you think that will have an impact? I'm not sure if that would be over to Martin or yourself, because, you know, I see that being a wellbeing centre as kind of catching those young people before they fall, and, you know, gathering those ones who have not attended and making an environment like Councillor Goodjohn says, making a different kind of environment that would support those pupils. So possibly that would have an impact on the attendance figures also.
Yeah, I think you're right. I mean, it's whether within school itself, within, if you like, a mainstream school, and also within then the more specialist provisions, it's ensuring that young people's needs are being met. Because, you know, going back to the barriers, if a young person feels their needs aren't being met, there's you know, that will be the barrier, and that can be through their learning, you know, for support with their social and emotional well-being, and so on. So certainly, yes, you know, for some learners, the fact that then they feel that, you know, the environment they're learning in is right for them is going to improve their engagement and therefore their attendance. As well as there now with under Yscola Derry, we've got the Horizon provision as well, which really supports those young people with significant health issues, anxiety issues. You know, it could be eating disorders and so on. So it's, you know, it's ensuring that the schools are aware, which they are, and they're very good at the referrals and identifying the needs of the young people, so that those places then can be allocated to those young people who have that higher level of need as well. Morwen, do you want to add to that? Yeah.
Yeah, thanks, if you don't mind, Chair. Just to come in on Councillor Payne's point, when you think of the number of children and young people who are at Derry Newydd, and also Horizon that Susan has mentioned, it's a small percentage of the overall figures in the Vale. But for the pupils who were in Horizon, they were mostly not able to access school at all prior to going to Horizon. So therefore, they will have had zero absence. And now we're in a position where they are attending school. So their attendance, individual attendance, has significantly risen because they're now having their needs met at Horizon, you know, both their social, emotional, mental health needs, as well as their learning and curriculum needs too. And similarly for Derry Newydd, now that they're in a brand new building, which is fit for purpose, while we don't know yet, we are hopeful that attendance will improve for those young people. And it certainly wouldn't have a detrimental impact, because those young people were already counted their attendance anyway, even before moving to the new building.
Okay, thank you both. And I just have a little bit more, Chair, sorry. And that is, do you think, you're looking at, you know, around 10-11% of young people non-attending, that there is also, picking up on Councillor Goodjohn's point as well, around engaging them online possibly, that there is a culture shift that we're seeing? Or, I mean, we can't predict the future, obviously, but it does seem across the board, if you look at the UK stats, that there, you know, with the decline in school attendance, that there is a cultural shift in how education is viewed by some young people who are hard to, you know, possibly hard to engage.
Very possibly. I don't think we know the answer to that.
No,
but
we
I think
don't.
you may well be right. Unfortunately, and we had this conversation earlier this afternoon with head teachers, even if young people are at home and accessing learning online, it still can't count as a present mark for attendance.
Yeah.
The present is actually physically present in the school building, and that is a Welsh Government decision. So there will be some young people who are learning, but not officially in school.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Helen. Councillor Marshalsea.
Hi, thank you. Thanks for the report. Really good to see how everything's going. Amazing. Just a few little questions I've got. I think as a teacher, I always cringed during attendance award assemblies. I think my heart always went out to those pupils that I knew would never get one. They either obviously, usually a child with medical or disabilities, I knew they were not going to get an attendance award. And as a child, when you're sitting in assembly, I'm generally thinking about primary schools as well. You're always aware, actually, these children have one and you haven't, you failed. I see it in my 2 children now, because I've got one child who's pretty nearing 100% attendance and the other one who has medical needs and will very rarely get 100% attendance. And I was just concerned and want to know really whether sort of in the attendance toolkit that you're giving to schools, if awards for 100% attendance and these sorts of things are generally something that the council is approving of.
No, we haven't. We've left that to a school-based decision. I know from going out to schools, I think schools are very conscious of that. And if anything, their celebration is sometimes improvement on an individual level, rather than, you know, everybody was 100%. And like you said, there could be very legitimate reasons why some young people will never reach that level. So yeah, so in the toolkit, we're not promoting, you know, that culture as such. It is a very school based. I mean, they know their communities, they know their young people, you know, they know the needs of their children. So their celebration or I don't know, exploration of attendance, you know, from what I can see and what the team can see going out is, you know, schools are sensitive to that, I would say.
Thank you.
Yeah.
I appreciate it. It just seems quite an ableist approach, and yeah, you know, it definitely still happens, that's for sure. My other question was around your walking buses. So I worked in active travel schools for a while and have set up numerous walking buses. I was just wondering if you could tell me a little bit more about the pilot and if there's any way we can support more schools in doing this. I know that I walk my kids to school every day and I usually take a gaggle from the street as well. And actually just having other children walking with them makes such a difference to their mental health. I think my youngest child would probably struggle going in every day, just that transition of leaving me, walking through that school building. However, having that group mentality of going in together really changes that. And I feel like walking buses is a real easy way to increase attendance of those poor attenders.
Yeah, well, this is quite sort of hot off the press in a way. We went to a cluster group with various schools in Barry. Actually, it was just through discussion and through the conversation. We were just looking at some of the barriers. So some of the barriers for some families is habits sometimes of families, work routines of families, cost of travel, etc., etc. And anyway, we went on to the conversation about potentially organising walking buses amongst the clusters. So it was only on Friday then we did a follow-up meeting. So now we've got some ideas and plans, which really I'm just in the process now of sitting down with Martin and Morwen and going through that. But the heads were very keen, and for all the reasons you've outlined, because, and also it's something as a pilot that if we can kickstart it and as a local authority support the schools to kickstart it, it then could become quite a cost effective but sustainable approach, like you said, to bring parents together and the school and then the children to have that sense of community as well, and like you said, walking through the gates together. So so probably the next time maybe we, you know, I sort of have this opportunity to chat to you about attendance, we can see the follow-up of how that pilot has worked, and obviously if it has an impact, a positive impact, and some reflections on that experience, then hopefully by the, you know, the end of the year or the middle of the year we can share that with other clusters, and then spread that idea, and looking at the practicalities as well. Or a bike bus, yeah, maybe.
There's a bike bus in Radnor, it's amazing.
Yeah. Okay. I'll have to find out more. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Naomi. Councillor Birch.
Thank you. I'd just like to pick up on what Naomi was saying about walking buses. I mean, while you know, it's absolutely brilliant for the children, they're out there getting fresh air, etc. It will also cut down on the congestion around schools. I mean, I live in Penarth. My children went to school there. Every single school is absolutely, you know, inundated with cars every morning. Quite often with parents who simply want to make sure their child has gone to school, even though the child doesn't need that lift. So, you know, I think that that's going to be a really good thing. You know, we could have parents parking, I don't know, quarter of a mile away and then collecting together in order to do these walking crocodiles, they were called when I was in school. Because I think that that would be so much better than the congestion that we see.
Oh, I think Councillor Birch is frozen.
Yes,
Yeah.
Chair, she's frozen for me as well, I'm afraid.
Okay. Hopefully we'll get Councillor Birch back. Councillor Marshall, see you in the meantime.
I'd like to get involved in that if I'm allowed to, by the way.
Thank you. Yeah, that'd be great. Thank you.
Great. Yeah, Councillor Birch just frozen, so hopefully she'll pop back in at some point. In the meantime, just looking at the recommendations at the end, wants to note the report and receive a further progress update in 12 months. I'd like to suggest, I think it was a great presentation, and given the reaction, maybe in 6 months, if that would be okay, if we could receive a progress update in 6 months.
Yeah, that's great. Thank you.
Great. So brilliant. So I move then that we note the report and receive a further progress update. Actually, Councillor Birch is back. Sorry, Rani.
Thank you. I don't know what happened there. It just dropped. The whole thing just dropped. No, I'm just, you know, everything agreeing with Naomi. I think everyone's absolutely in favour of this. It's such a good idea. So I'll bow out now. Thank you.
Oh, that's great. Thank you. So to reiterate, I move that we note the report and that the committee receives a further progress update report in 6 months. If I could have a seconder for that.
Happy
Emma,
to second.
Naomi, thank you very much. Thank you, everyone. And thank you for the presentation.
Thanks, everybody.
Cheers. Agenda item 6, it's the consultation on the proposed change of category of Stanwell School. Lisa.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. If it's okay, I'll just share a brief presentation with you.
Yeah.
Can everybody see that? Let me know when it.
Yeah, it's come through.
Great. Okay, thank you. So this report is to advise the committee of the proposal presented by the governing body of Stanwell School. So to reiterate, this is a governing body proposal, not a council proposal, although the council officers within my team are supporting the school with the administration of the consultation, as we have experience in that area. The proposal is to change the category from a foundation school to a community school with effect from the commencement of next academic year, September 24. The consultation is being produced in line with all of the relevant legislation that's listed there on the slide for your information. And the reasons for the proposal are varied due to some financial and organisational challenges the schools experienced. The governing body felt that it was in the best interests of staff, pupils and the community to allow to explore this. One of the key concerns was ensuring that the school was receiving the additional assurance and specialist support it was required. There was also a need to ensure financial stability in terms of revenue, but also in capital investment and additional funding streams that the council has the opportunity to share. School admissions was a key issue raised. At the moment, Stanwell manage their own admissions as a foundation school. Coordinating admissions mean that one pupil, one place is offered, rather than at the moment a child could be offered a place at Stanwell, but also accept an offer offered by the council, thereby sitting on two places and preventing another child from receiving a place until very late in the procedures. There was also a belief that this proposal would allow the school to basically gain support from other schools in the area, rather than working alone in some regards. I've covered admissions briefly there, but just to highlight, as part of the consultation, one of the things that parents would be immediately concerned about is that they've made decisions about their schooling for their children at a very early age, and may have determined that they wanted a place in a particular primary school because it fed a particular secondary school. So to honour those arrangements and any decisions parents may have made, the governing body have put in transition arrangements so that if this proposal goes ahead and the school becomes a community maintained school, then parents and children up to September 2030 would be have that transition arrangement in place as a feeder status, if you like. Another key aspect of the governing body's proposal is the issue of the building. So currently, the building in the school is owned by the governing body. As a community school, the building legally would transfer to the local authority, and with it, some obviously responsibilities for that building outside of those that are delegated to the governing body. That would mean that the school would have the benefit of prioritisation based on condition surveys in our asset renewal programme, the school investment strategy, and obviously our capital works programme. It also ensures that it would access, as I've mentioned previously, funding attached to that. In terms of an impact on staff learning and teaching, governing bodies manage the the head teacher and SLT manage the day-to-day running of a school. Governing bodies make decisions based on curriculum, budget, all of those things, staffing. None of those things would change as a result of this proposal. The only key change, I guess, in terms of those aspects is that the Vale of Glamorgan would become the employer rather than the governing body. But in terms of how the school operates on a day-to-day basis, there would be no material change in that. As in the case with all consultations, we've had a series of events that my team have supported the governing body with. Staff meetings, parent and community drop-ins, pupil engagement sessions. The last community drop-in session was yesterday, and the consultation concludes on the 23rd of October. In addition to those opportunities for the community and other stakeholders to find out more about the proposal, there is the usual way of submitting views, and the council will be supporting the governing body in putting together all of that information so that the governing body can produce a report outlining the conclusions of their consultation. On this slide is some key dates. As I said, as I've outlined, the closing date is the 23rd. The report will be considered by the governing body in November, and then if there are certain dates that follow. So the decision should be made in the early spring, with a view to, if it all goes ahead, the introduction would take place from September. So that is the end of my brief presentation. If anybody has any questions, Chair, I'd be pleased to take them at this stage.
Sure. Thanks very much for the presentation, Lisa. So over to councillors if there are any questions. No. Councillor Hodges.
Yeah, just a quick one, Chair. I mean, this has been on the cards now for some time. This is part of the consultation. Just to say that I fully support the school and the council in this change. I think foundation schools are a bizarre concept when they're brought through. There's only 4 primaries and 8 secondaries in the whole of Wales. The sooner they all go, the better. Very supportive. Thank you.
Thanks, Nick. Any other comments or questions from councillors? Councillor Birch.
Thank you. Thank you for the presentation. That was very thorough and a very fair-minded, I felt. I would just like to reiterate to people that, you know, apart from the school coming back under local council control, there will be no changes. The staff and the officers of the authority have gone out of their way to ensure that services provided for the children and their education have not changed, that they will, you know, still be able to access the same learning you know, the same facilities and presumably come up with the same kind of results as they were previously, because I know that that concern has been expressed. Lisa, you addressed the point about, you know, legacy, where children who are going to the school will also be able to have their siblings attend afterwards, which is also another concern. All I can say is that, you know, in order to be financially secure, this is the best move for the school. And I'll be interested to see the results of the consultation, which are obviously in about 10 days' time. So, you know, when that's reported back to us, I look forward to it. And I'd like to thank the officers for all the work they've had to do, because, you know, having to step in for a school with a deficit that large has meant obviously extra work on top of everything else that they do. So thank you.
Thank you, Rhiannon. Councillor Payne.
Thank you, Lisa. Thank you for that. That was really comprehensive. Having worked within the community school focus schools agenda in a few local authorities, I kind of see it as a positive. It opens out the school to the community. You know, things are more transparent, more accessible. So, you know, I commend you on all of the work that you've done, and I only see it as a positive. So well done.
Thank you.
Thank you, Helen. I don't think there are any other questions. Oh, sorry, Trevor.
I was just going to say, as we do with all of our consultations, just to encourage folks to have a read of the consultation document. There's lots of facts and figures in there, and an FAQ that folks might be interested in to address some of the topics that Lisa mentioned. We've also got some contact information on there, so if people are unsure and they have specific questions relating to their circumstance, then by all means, please use that information and get in touch with us, and we can make sure that you get the right answers.
Thanks, Trevor. I just wanted to ask you, are you content that you're reaching as many parents as possible with this consultation? Are you satisfied with the take-up so far?
Yeah, as I said, we've had several engagement sessions. The school, the governing body, have a newsletter that goes out every 2 weeks, and every time the newsletter goes out, there's a reminder to parents about responding to the consultation. Likewise, staff and the wider community in publications in and around Penarth. So I believe, although it's not, as I said, it's not a council consultation, but I believe from the feedback I've had from the acting head teacher that there is a lot of engagement in terms of people being advised of the consultation. Responses aren't huge so far, but they're quite balanced in terms of responses and generally positive. So parents are engaging in the process and the community also.
Right, thanks, Lisa. And then finally, for me, just about the internal audit into the Wellbeing Centre. What's the progress on that?
That's probably better asked at the Governance and Audit Committee, where the team is looking at that and continuing their work around the audit.
Yeah, I might drop an email. Oh, Paula.
Sorry, I had a trouble with my hand there. Yeah, that audit, I think, has been concluded, and there was an update to the last Audit and Governance Committee. So you should be able to view that. I wasn't in attendance at that, but there was an update provided. And I believe there's then going to be a further more comprehensive audit carried out during the autumn term. I don't believe that one's commenced yet.
Great, thank you for that, Paula. If there are no other comments or questions from councillors, so I move that we note the governing body's decision to undertake a consultation, and that we've considered the proposals as part of the consultation exercise. So if I'd be able to have a seconder for that. Councillor Hennessy, thumbs up. Thank you very much.
If I may, Chair, sorry to interrupt.
Yeah, sorry, Amy.
I do have the recommendation that you have stated about noting the governing body's decision to undertake the consultation. But the second, there was also a part of a recommendation was for the committee to be presented with that and the committee's thoughts on that matter. Did the committee wish to have a second recommendation that the proposal be endorsed by the committee, or are you just happy to note this evening?
Happy to note the the consultation, if people are okay with that.
Yeah, that's absolutely fine. So one recommendation to note. That's fine. Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Amy.
And
Sorry, go on.
I'll take Councillor Hennessy as seconding, if you're happy with to move, Chair.
Yeah, happy. Councillor Hodges. Sorry, Councillor Hodges. I missed your hand.
That's fine, Chair. I think, like I said in my very short input into it, this is a good thing for this council. I think it's a good thing for Stanwell, and I think it's a good thing for Penarth and the wider community. I think we should be saying that as part of this consultation, that we agree and endorse the way that this is going, and that the school comes back under local education authority control. I think we should do that, and if necessary, I'll move that.
Okay.
Yeah, I'd second that.
Emma, second it. Okay.
Thank you both. I'll
Okay,
take that back up to 2 recommendations then, Chair, if that's okay. With the second recommendation be that the proposal as presented be endorsed by the committee.
Thank you, Amy. Thank you, Nick.
Thank you.
Okay. Agenda item 7. It's Lisa again. It's the Governor Training Report for the 22-23 academic year.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I'll be brief on this one. You'll be aware that this report was originally requested by previous chairs of the committee as an annual report, and this is now the 9th year it's been presented. It's still good news in that we trained this year a record number of Vale governors during the last academic year. Going forward, the majority of training is likely to remain virtual for the time being, online, due to the positive engagement by governors, and there is concerns that a return to in-person training may result in a significant drop in numbers attending. Governors are generally reporting to us that they find it much more convenient for them to attend in this way, although the majority of training is delivered this way, but there are elements of training that are still delivered in person. So in summary, we provided 87 virtual courses last academic year, and they were attended by 756 Vale governors. As I said, that's the highest figure than any previously. In addition to the number of courses attended, the percentage of very good and good evaluations is also slightly higher than in previous years, but it's still slightly lower than in pre-COVID years. This seems to be because, and this is across the board, in other councils and in CSC as well. It seems that where there is a trainer present in the room waving the form in front of trainees and asking them to complete attendees and asking them to complete it, then those evaluations are a lot more forthcoming. But having said that, the average is around 50% rate, and ours last year was 59%. So we are still actually getting a good return in terms of feedback. And having said that, the feedback that we do have is well over 90% in terms of good or very good. So that's good. That's obviously positive. This academic year's training programme has been circulated to all governors already, and there are several new courses available. So hopefully we will have another good year in terms of training. And as I said earlier, the majority of training courses will continue to be held virtually for now. However, we'll continue to speak to our attendees and gain feedback from both them and our trainers to see whether there's anything further we could be doing. So that's a brief summary of the report, Chair, but as I said, if there's any questions, I'd be happy to take them.
Absolutely. Thank you for that, Lisa. Over to Martin Price.
Just as Chair of the Vale Governors Association, I'd like to reiterate what Lisa's saying. The feedback we've had from governors, from members of the association and the wider governor community is that the quality of training is very good. It meets the needs of people. It's accessible for doing that. And I just want to commend Lisa and the team at the Governor Support Unit for doing a very good job for us.
Thank you.
Thank you, Martin. Councillor Marshall, sir.
Hi, thanks, Lisa. I was just thinking about how as a governing groups of each school you're trying to ensure that the training is sort of equally spread as such, because I'm guessing you wouldn't want all governors to go on a similar training, as an example.
Well, it is a challenge, and as you'd expect, governors are volunteers, and obviously it's up to them to be able to make that time available. But a lot of time is given in terms of providing advice to governing bodies and chairs on the categories of governors who should attend the specific courses, and encourage them to spread. So, for example, not everybody needs to go on the safeguarding training, but obviously the safeguarding lead should be going. Finance committee, it should all be going on the finance training. So there is encouragement and advice to issue to all governors on which training applies best to which committee, for example. Some schools are better than others. And obviously, if there is a concern, that is raised with the chair of governors directly in terms of encouraging governors to attend training. But generally speaking, there is a good spread of training across the relevant committees, we find.
Sorry, just going back from that. Thank you. I was just wondering, I'm on governors for a school in Barry, for example, and we found it much easier because I basically said, right, guys, who wants to do what? And we sort of almost tallied them up, and then I sent the email for the whole governing body, which makes sense. So and it made it easier for everyone, because not everyone then had to email to, get booked on. Is there a way that obviously on most governing bodies, you have a link governor. Could there be a link governor for who is the training governor, as an example, who that's part of their role on the governing body? It's just an idea.
Yeah, some schools do have a training link, certainly, but that's something I can certainly speak to John Sparks about in terms of what we can do to encourage that. As you say, some governors might find it easier to be nominated, and others prefer to have a look at the suite of courses themselves. So yes, I'll take that on board and feed that back.
Thanks, Naomi. So if there are no other comments or questions, I move that we note the report and the presentation. If I could have a seconder for that. The Hennessy thumb. Thank you very much. Thank you, Lisa, and Trevor as well. Thanks very much for that. So we're on to the agenda item 8, which is the last one of the night. So first and second quarter scrutiny decision tracking. So I'll take the lead on this one. So this is a quarterly report on the progress of the committee's recommendations for the first and second quarters, and an FWP update. So there's only one ongoing recommendation. So that's relating to the invite to the MP and MS to address the Committee on School Finances. So all the other ones are completed, and there's no major slippage of reporting in the forward work programme. So there are updates that have been made to the programme since the agenda was published, and I'll just outline these. So the youth engagement and progression update will now come in December or January's meeting due to changes in the scrutiny report deadline dates, and there's going to be a lengthy agenda for December, I'm sure you'll all be glad to hear. And the Q2 revenue and capital monitoring reports will go to Cabinet on 16th of November, so that won't be coming to the Learning and Culture Committee until the meeting in December. Excuse me. So if there are any comments from councillors on that? No. Okay, so the recommendations are that the status of actions listed in appendices A and B of the report are agreed, and that the updated forward work programme schedule for 23-24, which is attached in Appendix C, is approved and uploaded to the Vale Glamorgan Council website. If I could have a seconder for that, please. Councillor Hennessy, diolch yn fawr. So that brings us to an end for tonight's meeting. Thank you, everyone, for... Oh, sorry, Geraint.
Yeah, just a quick point, Chair, because based on a conversation that happened earlier on, I didn't actually get a invite to this evening's meeting. I had to chase it through. I did get it this afternoon, but I know that there was a comment on an earlier point about somebody not being invited, so I don't know whether there was invites that went wayward somewhere for whatever reason. But just to say, because I've checked through my email and my spam. It's the first time it's happened, but I didn't get one, and I'm sure it was just an error somewhere.
Okay, thank you, Garrett. I'll make a note of that and have a chat with our officer about it. But thank you for that contribution. Thank you, everyone, for contributing. Thank you to Nick for the discussion earlier. Really appreciate it. And have a good night, everyone. I'll see you next month. Cheers.